Welcome to another deep dive. We're looking at Swaraj Engines Limited today, a company that makes diesel engines and components. We've got their financials, an auditor's report, a press release, and some filings with the stock exchange, all from January 17th, 2025.
Very exciting stuff.
Very exciting stuff. Swaraj Engines is posting record profits, not just for Q3, but for the first 9 months of their whole fiscal year. So we'll break down what's going on there and what it means going forward.
Yeah, and their performance is interesting. It gives us some insight into what's happening in the Indian economy, especially in the agriculture and commercial vehicle sectors.
So let's break this down. For anyone not super familiar with Swaraj Engines, can you just give us a quick overview?
Sure. Swaraj Engines Limited, or SEL, is an Indian company founded back in 1985. They're headquartered in Mohali, Punjab. And their main thing is supplying engines to the Swaraj division of Mahindra and Mahindra, which is a huge player in the automotive industry.
So when Swaraj Engines is doing well, it's a good sign for the tractor market in India.
Yeah, for tractors and commercial vehicles in India.
Okay. So let's look at those numbers from the press release. It sounds like they had a really good Q3. What's driving that?
So their engine sales volume for Q3 2024 hit 34,415 units. If you compare that to the same quarter last year, which was 27,104. That's a pretty big jump.
Wow, yeah. And what about their revenue?
So net operating revenue was a record 345.5 crore for Q3. That's up from 279.5 the year before. And actually, the press release specifically says that their Q3 PBT margin went up by 90 basis points.
That is impressive. And it sounds like it's not just the third quarter. The whole 9-month performance is even better.
It really is. The best 9 months in the company's history, both for sales and profit.
Amazing. Can you give us the highlights?
Yeah, total engine sales were 123,226 for the first 9 months. That's up from 103,417 last year. And net operating revenue hit 1,227.73 crore, way up from 1,068.28 in the same period last year.
Wow, those are definitely numbers to celebrate. But the press release also mentions robust engine demand as a big driver. What does that actually mean for people who don't follow this industry that closely?
Well, it tells us a few things. First, it points to a strong agricultural sector in India, because tractors use a lot of Swaraj Engines products. So if farmers are buying new tractors, it's good for Swaraj Engines.
So it's like a chain reaction. A healthy economy helps agriculture, which means more demand for tractors, which means more business for Swaraj Engines.
Exactly. It's all connected. And then there are also wider industry trends to think about. Infrastructure development, construction, the demand for commercial vehicles. Those all need diesel engines too.
So Swaraj Engines is definitely benefiting from this market demand. We're seeing record sales and profits. But what about the bigger picture? How healthy are their finances overall? Is this success sustainable?
Right. So to get at that, we can look at the independent auditor's report. They give a moderate assurance that the financial results are free from any big mistakes.
Can you break that down for people who don't speak accountant? What does a limited review audit actually mean?
Well, it means the auditors have done a good review, but they haven't looked at every single transaction like they would in a full audit. But it still gives investors a pretty good level of confidence in those numbers, especially for a public company like Swaraj Engines.
And speaking of investor confidence, one interesting thing from their financial filings is that they have absolutely no outstanding debt.
Yeah, that's a great sign of financial stability. It means they don't have to worry about interest payments, which gives them more flexibility to invest in growth or handle any economic problems that might come up.
That's great for investors, and it shows they're managing their finances responsibly. But a company is more than just its balance sheet. What about the people running the company? Any interesting news there?
Actually, yeah, there is. Swaraj Engines just appointed a new compliance officer.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
So the new compliance officer is Miss Geeta Karat. She's replacing Mr. Rajesh Kumar Kapila. But Mr. Kapila is staying on as company secretary.
Okay, a bit of a shift, but not a complete change. What's Miss Karat's background?
She's got some really impressive credentials. She's an associate member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, and she has master's degrees in both business law and commerce from the University of Mumbai.
Wow, 2 master's degrees. She sounds very qualified. But what about real-world experience?
Yeah, so she's got over 6 years of experience in corporate secretarial compliances. And since 2019, she's been with Mahindra and Mahindra Limited. So she already knows the industry well. And importantly, she's familiar with the parent company.
That's a good sign. It suggests continuity and understanding of how Swaraj Engines fits into the Mahindra and Mahindra world. You also mentioned she worked at Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS. What does she do there?
At TCS, she was in accounts and finance for about 6 years, and she even earned a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt certification there, which is all about process improvement and efficiency.
Okay, so in addition to her legal and compliance expertise, she also has a strong background in finance and making processes better. That's a great combination for a compliance officer. Can you explain what a compliance officer does for those of us who don't live in the corporate world? And why is this appointment so important?
Sure, basically, a compliance officer is there to make sure the company is acting ethically and following all the rules and regulations. That covers everything from financial reporting to environmental practices. They're trying to prevent the company from making mistakes that could hurt its reputation or get it in legal trouble.
So they're like the superheroes of the corporate world, making sure everyone is playing by the rules.
Yeah, you could say that. And their role is even more important now because the regulations are so complex. For a company like Swaraj Engines, that's part of a bigger group and listed on the stock exchange. Having a good, strong compliance officer is really important for maintaining investor confidence and ensuring sustainable growth.
It sounds like appointing Ms. Karat is a strategic move for Swaraj Engines. It shows they're committed to compliance and good governance. It's not just about checking boxes, it's about building an ethical culture.
Exactly. It shows they're serious about doing things the right way and protecting their reputation,
hmm
which in the long run is just as important as profit.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Swaraj Engines is having amazing success, record sales, healthy profits, no debt, and a new compliance officer with lots of experience.
You're doing really well.
Yeah. But as with any deep dive, we have to ask, what does this all mean? What's the bigger picture?
Yeah, that's the real question. And it's something for you, the listener, to think about, too. Will this success continue?
Well, it's a great question to ask. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of those record profits, but business can be unpredictable. What are some of the challenges that could come up that could change things for Swaraj Engines?
Yeah, what could disrupt their trajectory?
Well, we were talking about how their business is tied to the Indian economy, especially the agriculture sector. If those areas slow down, it could have a direct impact on the demand for tractors, and that means fewer engines they need to sell.
So they're not completely in control of their own destiny. They're vulnerable to those outside forces. What about competition? Are there other companies out there trying to take their spot?
Oh, definitely. The engine manufacturing market is very competitive. Swaraj Engines can't just sit back and relax. They have to innovate and keep finding ways to stay ahead.
And what about electric vehicles? Could that be a problem for them in the future? That's a big question, something they'll need to watch closely. Right now, diesel engines are still the main thing, especially in agriculture and commercial vehicles. But as technology changes and environmental regulations get tougher, Swaraj engines might have to change their strategy to stay in the game. Think about it. If their main customer, Mahindra and Mahindra, starts moving toward electric tractors, what does that mean for Swaraj engines?
Yeah, that's a great point. It shows how important it is to be flexible and ready for the future. They can't just rely on their current success. They have to be prepared for what's next.
Exactly. It's great to celebrate what they're doing well today, but it's also important to anticipate those challenges and opportunities down the road.
This deep dive has been really interesting. We've gone beyond just the surface level and looked at the factors that could shape Swaraj Engine's future. But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on the new compliance officer. What's your perspective on that, and why does it matter?
Oh, sure. As you said earlier, a company is so much more than its financial performance. People leading the organization and the culture they create are super important to long-term success. So the appointment of Ms. Gita Karat as the new compliance officer, that's a big deal.
Right. You mentioned her credentials earlier, but for anyone who missed that, could you just give us a quick rundown of her background?
Of course. So Ms. Karat is an associate member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. She's got master's degrees in business law and commerce from the University of Mumbai. She brings more than 6 years of experience in corporate secretarial compliances to the table. And since 2019, she's been with Mahindra and Mahindra Limited. Before that, she was at Tata Consultancy Services, where she worked in accounts and finance for about 6 years. And she even earned a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt certification, which shows she knows how to improve processes and make things more efficient.
It sounds like she's bringing a lot of knowledge and experience to this role. But for those of us who aren't familiar with corporate governance, could you explain what a compliance officer actually does? And why is this appointment significant?
Basically, a compliance officer makes sure a company is operating ethically and following all the laws and regulations. They oversee everything from financial reporting and internal controls to data privacy and environmental practices. They're like the guardians of the company's integrity.
So they're crucial for protecting the company's reputation and making sure it's sustainable in the long run.
Exactly. And in today's world, with all these complex regulations and so much scrutiny, having a strong and experienced compliance officer is super important, especially for a company like Swaraj Engines that's part of a larger group and listed on the stock exchange.
It does seem like Ms. Karat's appointment is a strategic move, showing that Swaraj Engines is committed to not just making money, but doing it the right way.
Absolutely. It's about more than checking boxes. It's about building a culture of compliance and integrity across the entire organization.
Okay, so we've got all this information, the record profits, the strong financials, the potential challenges, and these strategic changes with personnel. What's the main takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about when they consider Swaraj Engines and their future?
I think that's the heart of this deep dive, isn't it? We've gone beyond just headlines and charts. We've looked at the details of their business, the complexities of the market, and the forces that could affect them. And it all comes down to this. It all comes down to making smart decisions. We've given you the insights and the context, all the different perspectives you need to really evaluate Swaraj Engines. But ultimately, you have to make your own judgment.
It's like we've given our listeners all the puzzle pieces. Now it's up to them to put it together and see the whole picture.
Exactly. And that's what makes this kind of deep dive so powerful. We're not giving you the answer. We're giving you the knowledge and the tools so you can figure it out yourself.
So for everyone listening who's now thinking about the future of Swaraj Engines, what are some of the key questions they should be asking themselves?
Okay, well, first, how sustainable is their current success? We've seen their financials and they look great, but are there any weaknesses there? We talked about how they depend on the Indian economy and what could happen if the agricultural sector slows down. Those are things to consider carefully.
Yeah, it's important to look at both sides. It's easy to get excited about the good news, but it's also important to assess the risks. What else should our listeners be thinking about?
Competition is another big one. How well is Swaraj Engines positioned to fight off its rivals? Can they hold on to their market share? We talked about how important innovation is and the fact that electric vehicles are out there. These are trends that could totally change the industry.
Those are definitely some big questions. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Swaraj Engines Limited, what's the final takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I think this deep dive has been about more than just looking at one company. It's been about understanding how complicated the business world really is. Success is never guaranteed, and making informed decisions is so important. So as you continue to learn about business and finance, remember to approach everything with a critical eye. Don't be afraid to be skeptical, and always be curious to learn more.
That's great advice. And remember, everyone, the deep dive is here to help you understand these complex topics. We'll give you insights and spark your curiosity. Until next time, happy exploring.